Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy on Tuesday, August 8th. It's 9 p.m. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And my topic for today is changes part following a likely Russian victory in Ukraine, part 21. More on NATO, specifically what's likely to happen to NATO. Spent a lot of time talking about that last Tuesday, but I think we could use some more talking about it because I don't think we spent enough time talking about the likely longer term reaction to the Russian victory. I don't think I'll be joined this evening by Dee Pierce. She is not feeling very well today because she went to see a dentist earlier and her mouth, is sore. With luck, she will be returning tomorrow for the Dump the Corruption show. But right now, it's going to be just me tonight. Oh, I see Dee is in the comments. Thank you, Dee, for being in the comments. Okay, yesterday, I don't think I spent really quite enough time talking about what I think is likely to happen, to NATO. I have to be very clear about that because it involves a number of assumptions and beliefs that I have about the intentions of the nations that are part of the conflict. I'd like to share the screen again. I'd like to put up the NATO map from the Library of Congress. So there it is once again. So, a big question I did not spend a lot of time talking about last time, or a big issue. It presents itself when I make certain assumptions about what's going to happen to end this war. By the way, there was some news tonight that Russia is advancing on a broad front towards Kharkov. I don't know how far they've gotten. I haven't had a chance to look at the reports yet. But, and I don't even know how many soldiers are involved. So we'll have to keep that going, at a later time. But to continue on, let us assume that a peace is made, okay, and that Russia allows Kiev to have a rump state that shares the port, okay, of Odessa. So that Russia basically takes Kharkov and perhaps every bit, okay, well, I shouldn't even say every bit, okay, if Ukraine, let's say the border is set to the west, okay, of Kharkov. So Kharkov, the whole Donetsk and Luhansk, and Zaporozhia, Kherson region, of course, Crimea, all is recognized as a part, um, um, as a part of Russia. Okay, including the city of Odessa, but Russia, uh, uh, okay, that Russia offers to Ukraine sharing, okay, of the port of Odessa. Okay, so Ukraine can reach the outside world, but it's understood that Russia, okay, will govern Odessa, okay, as a city, and will have the superior authority there. So that will mean that Kiev still has a country, still has, okay, an outlet to the sea, still has a fairly large area. Its population will be greatly reduced. Uh, I'm not even sure how many millions of people will be left, okay, in Ukraine, because so many millions have left. There are various estimates now. So some estimates are that as low as 18 million people remain uh, um, in Ukraine as of this moment. I suppose some Ukrainians will be coming back in, but still, let's sort of assume that the end result of this all is that the population of Ukraine shrinks to about 25 million or so, and Ukraine is neutralized. It becomes, okay, a neutral country. Russia is successful, okay, in denazifying it. They've already come close to demilitarizing it. And let's say Kiev accepts that it will be a neutral country forever. It will never join the alliance, okay, of NATO, that it's prohibited from joining, okay, that alliance. So that nonsense then stops. So let's assume that Russia offers, okay, to the rest of Europe, okay, a common security framework. Okay, a kind of a loose alliance, maybe similar to NATO. Okay, a mirror image. Okay, of NATO. Uh, okay, where Russia will guarantee the security of other European countries. Okay, and the other European countries in turn will guarantee the security, okay, of Russia. So mutual guarantees of peace um, going forward. As part of the guarantees of peace, the Russians also offer trade relations to be resumed, okay, the removal of all sanctions, okay, on both sides. And of course, they offer free flowing natural gas to Europe as soon as pipelines can be reestablished. Okay. And let's say this happens by the end, okay, of this year. And the question is, what happens to NATO? Okay, of course, the United States would not be part of the European security framework because I doubt that Russia, and maybe by then many of the other European nations, might not think it appropriate for that. But let's say Russia offered that kind of deal, okay, to Europe and made the deal open only to nations, to the nations of Europe. Then what? What would be the reactions of the Europeans over the next 2 to 3 years? I wanted to talk about this because I think it's an interesting speculation. Uh, I see that Andy Candy is here. Andy Candy, sorry. Andy is here as well. So thank you for coming. So, okay, it seems to me that this is not something that all of the European nations might initially find attractive. But if Russia is willing to sign up to security guarantees of all the countries, okay, of Europe, including Finland, Sweden, the Low Countries, all the traditional historical enemies, okay, of Russia, and the Russians were to offer treaty guarantees that all could sign up to, then this might be attractive to many nations, especially considering that the politics of many of the European nations are likely to change. Just going to go over the major countries here and see how they would reply to such an offer and to such a suggestion. I suppose the Tory governments, okay, of the UK would certainly be opposed to that. They would want to continue the struggle against what they would view as the domination of Europe, okay, by Russia. That they would not immediately agree to that. There's probably going to be a change in France, okay, of the ruling party. And right now, it looks like France might be taken over by the right-wing party, okay, of Marine Le Pen, who is not happy about the intervention that we've seen, okay, in Ukraine. Let me see if I can gain control of this again. Yes, I can. So, would it be possible for France to sign up to this? I don't know. It might. It might find it attractive. Why would Russia offer this? Well, because Russia had been looking for a new security framework with Europe for some time. Now, this might not be a happy agreement for Belgium because the capital of NATO, is in Brussels. The capital of the EU, is in Brussels. Okay, the Netherlands also tends to be very Western, in its orientation. They might not be ready to accept that kind of agreement with Russia. I don't know where Denmark would stand in particular, but I think if Russia were to offer the restoration of the pipeline as an inducement, and given that Germany will have lived through the coming winter, that kind of offer from Russia to let bygones be bygones and to rebuild the pipeline with Germany and to offer liquid natural gas at good rates, that might be very attractive to Germany. Similarly, I don't see that the Czech Republic would necessarily have a problem with this. They might want to be included in a comprehensive security framework. I think the same thing is true, of Austria. I'm not sure whether Switzerland would like to join this or to remain as neutral. They might want to remain, as neutral. I think that Italy might find it attractive to be part of that kind of security framework. I think Hungary would find that attractive also. I think Slovenia might also find it attractive. But I think Poland has been among the most enthusiastic countries in taking an oppositional stance towards Russia in ways connected to the conflict, in Ukraine. So Poland might choose to be a problem. The Low Countries, of course, are very anti-Russian, in large part. Some of them, though, have substantial Russian populations. I'm sure Belarus would love to join such a security framework, and Ukraine, as a neutral country, the country that was neutralized by Russia, might also want to join that kind of security framework. After all, why not? Why not? That would put them on the same footing as other nations, of Europe. They would be guarantors of Russian security, and the Russians would be guarantors, of their security. Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, those are all countries that might find that attractive. as would Serbia. Certainly, they would find that attractive. Whether Albania, Bosnia, Herzegovina. Okay, I don't know whether Austria would find it attractive. They might want to stay neutral. There may come about in parts of Central Europe, okay, a neutral bloc that wouldn't want to be part of a defense agreement because they wouldn't see any need to be part of a defense agreement. Romania might be interested in such a mutual security agreement, and Moldova, okay, as well. What I'm saying is the Russians might be able to get the security framework that they were looking for before the war from the NATO nations that were all joined in support, okay, of the war, okay, in Ukraine. Finland and Sweden, okay, and Norway might want to remain neutral, but they also might want, since they share borders with Russia, they all do. No, Sweden doesn't share a border with Russia, but Norway does, and Finland does. They share a small border, okay, with Russia. Maybe Sweden would want to stay neutral. Maybe they would want to join the security framework. I don't know. But if Russia offered peace on a broad front, and they offered a mutual security framework, and they offered a pretty good deal for Ukraine, considering that they had badly lost the war. If Russia turned a peaceful face towards Europe, didn't try to coerce agreement into the mutual security framework, what would be the forces that would make the mutual security framework attractive to Europe, make it seem attractive? First, of course, the truth is going to come out that it was the United States that bombed the Nord Stream pipeline and stopped the flow of liquid natural gas, okay, to Europe. It will be seen by many of the Europeans that the United States did this not just for supporting Ukraine, but for the purpose of forcing Europeans to buy liquid natural gas at much inflated prices from the United States. I'm sure that Germans would see it as an anti-competitive move by the United States, because the deindustrialization of Germany would mean that Western Europe would be a market that would be more open for U.S. goods. There's going to be politics in Germany that's going to emphasize this, and that's going to bring out the destruction of the pipeline. France was moderately affected by that too, and other nations of Europe, because they couldn't get the liquid natural gas that was flowing from the pipeline that was available to them at cheap rates. And they will have suffered through the coming winter. They will have suffered as a result. Their economies will have suffered. European economies are likely to go into a recession. Of course, the collective West will try to blame that, on Russia. But a large part of that recession is going to be due to the destruction of the pipeline. And the people of Europe are not stupid. As that news begins to circulate and become popular opinion in Europe, which I think it's going to do, that's going to create a great deal of resentment in Italy, Germany, and France, three of the biggest economies in Europe. I think the resentment might also reach Spain even. It would be four of the biggest economies in Europe. Now, Russia could offer peace to Ukraine also, to the United Kingdom as well. Whether the United Kingdom actually accepts the arrangements offered could well depend on whether the English people continue to keep the Tories in power. I personally think that since the Tories took over, which I seem to remember was in 2010, there have been governments whose policies have been pretty disastrous for the UK since that time. So maybe the UK is ready for a change. If they bring in Labour, and if Russia offers favorable terms in return for peace, I don't know if Russia will, but I'm just postulating this as a possibility. They've looked for peace with Europe for so long now. Basically, the United States has arranged things so they could not have it. But at this point, with the failure of NATO arms, not of NATO itself, of course, because they didn't send their troops in, but the failure of NATO arms to win, in Ukraine, I think the nations of NATO are going to wonder about the U.S. guarantee that they now have. They're going to wonder about the value of NATO. They're going to wonder what use, is NATO. If Putin allows by Ukraine to continue to exist and gives them a chance to prosper, and they could give them a chance to prosper, they could wrap them into the Belt and Road Initiative. I think other nations of Europe could get the same opportunity to bring the Belt and Road Initiative into the part of Europe. I think the Russians have something very valuable to offer there. Of course, if they have the collaboration of the Chinese, which I think they will have. That represents new opportunities for the whole of Europe. And if on the military side, they have the guarantee of a treaty, and they've already had the experience of the United States actually attacking its NATO ally, Germany, by destroying the pipeline that was a German pipeline as well as the Russian pipeline. Given that, it seems to be the anger against the United States in Central Europe and Western Europe from doing that is likely to be substantial. And some of those states may begin to think that they're more secure with Russia than they are with the United States. Remember, Russia won't have attacked them. They will only have launched an attack on Kiev. And in response to NATO surrounding them. If they then offer a decent settlement to Kiev and peaceful relations with Russia over the long term through a new mutual security framework, I think a lot of the European nations are going to find that attractive. If that happens, of course, there will be no reason for NATO. The reason for being of NATO has always been defense against a hostile Russia. But if they face a Russia that doesn't appear to be hostile, and it doesn't seem to want to expand beyond the area of Ukraine that is predominantly Russian, they may begin to perceive Putin as someone who wants peace. If that perception should spread, what is the reason for NATO? Will the West Europeans have anything to gain? Will they want to get some kind of revenge for the Russian victory? I mean, why? If Russia offers peace, the restoration of economic relations makes the material wealth of Russia makes that available to Europe on a commercial basis, puts into the mutual security agreement that there will be a reduction in armed forces. Of course, the Russians have built up their armed forces in response to this war. Their ground troops, in response to this war. But if as part of the peace agreement, they promise to scale down again to the approximate state at the start of the Ukraine war, and the European countries make similar guarantees, so they scale down the size of their armed forces too, Why would the nations of Western and Central Europe, why would they not find that entirely attractive? Why wouldn't they just say goodbye to NATO, okay, and all that? Now, what are some countries that might not want to do that? Well, I think Poland and Estonia, Latvia, okay, and Lithuania would be the diehards. They're the ones that have felt most threatened by Russia historically, and for good reason. And the United States has been building Poland up as a bulwark, okay, against Russia. So I don't know whether those countries would want to come in. I think Latvia, Lithuania, okay, and Estonia, though, if the mutual security framework seemed strong enough, and if the Russians were willing to scale down the size of their ground army, then I don't know whether they would see a visible threat, okay, from Russia. Poland would only have a border with Russia from the Kaliningrad salient that was given to Russia at the end of the Second World War, so it would have an easy outlet to the Baltic Sea. However, Kaliningrad is not really a threat, okay, to Lithuania. It's just a salient. I don't think it's much of a threat to Poland also. I cannot gauge what the politics would be in Poland, what the political response would be to such an offer by the Russians. I do think the political response in France and Germany and Italy and some of the other smaller countries of Europe might be very favorable. I think the political response in Spain and Portugal might also be pretty favorable. I think the idea of making peace with the Russians and letting them into Europe may be very popular in some of the countries, okay, of Europe. So I just want you to think about that. Okay? I want you to cogitate about that. Maybe that, such an offer, would cause NATO to fade away. Because I don't think the nations of Europe really want to be a part, okay, of a NATO that the United States wants to bring over to fight in the Pacific. I don't think any of the Europeans have an interest in that. Maybe the United Kingdom still has an interest in that. But I don't think the other nations of Europe really do. So maybe Russia, if it acts properly at the end of this war, could offer peace to Europe and have it accepted by most of Europe. As I said before, whether it would be accepted by the Tories, I think that's another question. I don't even know if it would be accepted by Labour. A lot of people are pretty mad about the Russian invasion, of Ukraine. I think a lot of people don't accept the idea that they were surrounding Russia and becoming a real threat to the security, of Moscow. After all the propaganda, I don't know if the nations, of Western Europe see the truth, in that they made use of the weakness of Russia for more than 20 years to move the borders of NATO right up to the border, of Russia, very close to the border, of Russia. And that they continue to do so during the Ukraine war, trying to expand to Finland, which they have expanded to already, trying to expand to Sweden, which they're in the process of doing. They were just enlarging, expanding by a huge amount. The common borders, with NATO states. The collective West actually did that. And they were consciously trying to surround Russia. And we know now, and the world knows now, based on statements by Macron, and by Angela Merkel, that the objective was to build up the Ukraine, to use it as an armed force, to hurt Russia, to replace the regime in Russia, and even, if possible, to dissolve the Russian Federation, so Russia could never be a world power again. I mean, the news this was their motive is out. Everybody recognizes this was the truth. I think after the war, the nations of Europe will come to a realization that the Russians had good justification for invading Ukraine when they did. And that when they first invaded, furthermore, they were still looking for negotiations, because they only invaded with 200,000 troops. It was like what they were trying to do was to give to Zelensky and the Ukrainians, a shot up the side of the head to tell him, we're interested in sitting down and trying to get a settlement of this. And of course, the story is clearly understood by all parties right now, that Kyiv had an agreement with Moscow in early April of 2022, and that agreement was then sabotaged by the intervention of the UK and Boris Johnson. Since everybody knows that now, it adds to the case that the intervention by Russia was justified. And that it wasn't a manifestation of Russian aggression. It wasn't a manifestation of a desire by Russia to once again conquer the whole of Eastern Europe. None of that was involved. All that was involved was a desire for the security, okay, of Russia and for the development of a new security framework with Europe, which Russia had made it known was their intention all throughout 2020, 2021, and even the years before. So, I know this is speculation. I know that the enmity the Poles have had for Russia for a long time, and apparently continue to have, might torpedo this kind of agreement. But we have to look at this from a realistic point of view. If Russia were to offer that, and if the rump state of Ukraine were wrapped into it, and if the Czechs joined, and the Slovaks joined, and the Hungarians joined, and Germany joined, and France joined, and Spain joined, and the nations of Northern Europe were also to join, and Poland and the Baltic countries would be surrounded by nations that had joined a mutual security framework with Russia. Could they really stay out of the same framework? Would it make sense for them to do that? I don't think so. I mean, remember, Russia would be guaranteeing their security. So, I think if Russia made diplomatic moves like that, to end the hostility that we're seeing now, what could the United States offer to the nations of Europe to get them to keep NATO going? Looking at it from the standpoint of the United States, what do we really have to offer? Do we have the nuclear umbrella of the United States to offer? Well, if the Russians don't seem threatening, it may seem that the nations of Europe would have greater security from some kind of nuclear exchange by joining with Russia. At least they would know that Russia wouldn't be pointing its missiles at them any longer. If they developed a mutual security framework with Russia, they wouldn't be the middle area where tactical nukes would be used first. Those Russian missiles would all be pointed at the United States. So what could we offer to Europe? We could offer them the protection of our nuclear umbrella. But that means that if there were a nuclear war between the United States and Russia, among the first places that would be bombed would be the European cities. Why should they stay, in NATO? Right now, it makes no sense for the Europeans to stay. I don't think it makes sense for the United Kingdom to stay also. But I just think the ties with the United States are so strong that they would really hesitate to fully go into Europe and put aside the Anglo-American special relationship, which they have, okay, with the United States. They might stay out. I don't think the Russians would much care about that if the rest of Europe were to join them in a mutual security network, and if as a result they would become fully a part, okay, of Europe. They always wanted to do that. I recognize that Europe is tarnished for them now because they were hurt so grievously by the war, okay, in Ukraine. But having Russian trade back and expanding trade relations in Russia would have the effect of building up the economies of Europe again. And then a lot of magnificent business could be done, especially if the Belt and Road Initiative is extended to Europe. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. I wanted to talk about that happening just as a possibility. I understand it's a speculation. I understand it's going to involve some out-of-the-box thinking, in the first instance by the Russians, but in response by the other nations of Europe, okay, as well. But I think I've made the case here why this is in the interest of all the nations of Europe. I think it's even in the interest of the Baltic countries and Poland. I think the possibilities are really great for all of Europe to make peace now if the Russians were to lead the way. If this were to happen, we might be living in an interesting world to come. Okay. So I have some comments. I have some old friends who have shown up for this. Let me see if I can expand the size of the comments. So let's see. So Andy Candy says, shared, hope it helps somehow. Thank you, Andy. Evelina says, hello, looking forward to Dr. Joe's assessment of this war. Well, Evelina, I've been doing assessments of this war. This is part 21 of my assessments of this war. So I've been doing assessments for a very long time now of various aspects of the likely impact. I think my treatment of the likely impact over the 21 parts has been more systematic and comprehensive than anyone else's. You might enjoy going back to the other Tuesday broadcasts to check them out and see what I've had to say, sometimes in combination with Dee, and sometimes with other guests as well. Andy Candy says, saw a headline that Saudi Arabia wanted to negotiate a peace agreement, and Russia said no, okay, or yet, but I didn't get a chance to read the article, so I'm not clear about the particulars. I'm not clear about the particulars either, but uh, Russia wanted a peace agreement clearly right at the start of the war. They were ready to make peace in April of 2022. Um, 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 Turkey was brokering the peace. Everything had been written down. The peace agreement was ready to be signed and ratified, and the West certainly torpedoed it. Now, I don't know when Saudi Arabia came into the picture and wanted to negotiate a peace agreement, but I know that nations have different ideas about peace agreements at different stages of a war. Russia changed its views on peace agreements when it had to go through the trouble of mobilizing all those troops that it has now. That was a considerable effort. It was a considerable expense. They've lost considerable lives in this. I think their losses are much less than Ukraine losses. I think Ukraine fatalities have been roughly 400,000. I think Russian fatalities have been 40,000. But that's appreciable for a nation of 145 to 150 million people. So, after all those losses, okay, and all this fighting, I don't think Russia is ready to have a peace agreement yet. I think it wants Kharkov and Odessa before it will consider a peace agreement. Those have been historically Russian places. They should never have been, in Ukraine. It was only an accident of history they got into Ukraine. Since Russia has had all this trouble with this intervention, I think it wants to have some gains out of it, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. And Lisa joined us and says hello at 9:31. And Lisa says, divvying up nations as the U.S. finds itself sitting this round out. Yes, Lisa, perhaps. And Dee says, hi, Lisa. Lisa says, hi, Dee. And Lisa says, sorry about your dentist visit. And Lisa says, the 40-year-old question. Lisa says, we did it. We've answered the question. NATO will be officially hollowed out. Will be officially a hollowed out hall of aggression. Perhaps so. Evelina says, what you're saying sounds very promising, makes me feel optimistic. And Evelina says, more optimistic, I mean. Yes, I should add, as I've expressed in a number of conversations with Lisa that we've had offline, there is a danger that when the Russians have clearly won and are ready to negotiate a peace, that the neocons in Washington will not be ready to give it up, and that they go nuclear. There is still a very heavy risk, of that. I don't think they're crazy enough to do that, but I know others can disagree about that. So Lisa asks, does anybody but the United Kingdom have a decent navy? That's a very good question. Okay, the United Kingdom still has a decent navy, I think, but the other navies are small. I think Sweden has a navy, but I don't know whether it qualifies. Okay, as decent. I think Norway has a navy too, but I don't know whether that qualifies. Okay, as decent. Uh, I'm sure Portugal and Spain also have navies, but I don't know how decent, okay, those are. France probably still has a navy. I would say it's not very decent right now. Germany never built up one again. Evelyn says, refreshing not to hear propaganda. Lisa says, we haven't really gotten into Denmark, okay, and Netherlands and that area of states. I would assume they have a decent fleet. I don't know if they do anymore. I mean, we have to define what we mean by decent. They might have a decent fleet under certain criteria. I don't think they'd have a bigger fleet than Norway and Sweden. They might have fleets of the same size. Uh, okay, I think that it might be Netherlands has a decent size fleet, and as I said, I think Portugal and Spain, because they have a lot of overseas trade with Latin America, might have a decent sized navy. Andy Candy says, I saw the headline about the peace agreement just yesterday, so it's recent. Thanks for your excellent program. But sorry, Andy, I'm not sure which headline about which peace agreement you're talking about. But just yesterday, it was widely known at the time, perhaps a couple of months after the torpedoing, okay, of the peace agreement by Boris Johnson in 2022. It's been widely known since then that there was such an agreement that was about to be signed, and Boris Johnson was able to torpedo it by going to Zelensky and promising Ukraine the world, which is what they did. Basically promising the everlasting support of Ukraine, okay, and the United States. And Zelensky fell for it. Uh, so, okay, there's that. So if there are no more comments, then I will say good night for tonight. Tomorrow I will be back. Okay, I hope that Dee will be able to join me. I'll be doing a Dump the Corruption show there. My show for tomorrow night. My show, okay, on empowering democracy tomorrow night will be a Dump the Corruption show. And the title of it would be Biden's Risk to Democracy and Dumping the Corruption. So you might want to tune in for that. That's going to be an interesting take on the risks, okay, to democracy that are present through the reelection, okay, of Joe Biden. If you recall, some of you may recall last week, okay, I did a show on Trump's risk to democracy and dumping the corruption. So I thought it would be only fair tomorrow if I did a show on Biden's risk to democracy if he, okay, is reelected to the presidency. I think that both Trump's reelection to the presidency and Biden's reelection, okay, to the presidency represent substantial risks to actually attaining democracy in the United States. Both administrations would be risky for democracy. So I spoke my piece on Trump last week. This week, I'm going to speak my piece on Joe Biden. So thank you for coming tonight. Okay, I appreciate it. It was nice to see you again, Evelina. And as always, it was very nice to see Lisa and Andy Candy. Thank you very much. Andy was talking about the Saudi Arabian proposal. Yes. Okay, and indicated that Russia is fuming over Saudi Arabia's proposal. Now I know, yes, I did hear that such a proposal was in the offing, and I did hear that its terms are likely to be such that Russia would reject it out of hand. And so, no, it's too early for Russia to have a peace agreement now. They took the trouble to demilitarize the Ukraine by destroying 3 Ukrainian armies. This latest army that's been destroyed during the counteroffensive was the 3rd army that was put up by the Ukrainians. This was very costly to the Russians, far more costly to Ukraine. But Russia would be remiss if it did not now take advantage of what it has gained militarily and gotten itself a favorable peace. It will be a peace that it really, it really deserves, in my view. Anyway, thank you all for coming. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.